Round 2 of the Magnus Invitational tournament was played today. This groundbreaking online tournament between 8 of the strongest players in the world, organised by none other than the world champion Magnus Carlsen himself. I'm going to take you through a cracking game today, played between Giri and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. In the first game, Maxime had won really quite convincingly. He'd outplayed Giri in a long end game, which I really didn't expect actually. Giri normally very good at defending these kind of positions. So going into game 2, Giri was hoping to hit back with the white pieces. Now this is interesting. Maxime played d5. Normally he plays the Grunfeld, that's his massive opening. But no Grunfeld today. Maybe he just wants to avoid all these his well-known openings. Doesn't want to give away any opening preparation. Of course, Giri is one of his opponents in the candidates tournament. And we have a Slav today. Who knows? Maybe MVL would be using this in the latter half of the candidates tournament, whenever it comes to pass. So normally this is territory which is very much Anish Giri's territory. And he plays bishop g5 and h6 and an exchange on f6 and e3. So this is kind of the starting position, and you can play various moves here. Knight e7, move the queen back. g6 of course is a very normal move, preparing to bring the bishop to the long diagonal. Now Giri plays a move which is a little bit unusual that he had to face himself fairly recently. I mean, of course, the normal moves here are to bring the bishop out to either e2 or d3 and prepare kingside castling. But instead of knight e5, a very aggressive move that Giri faced in St. Louis last summer. Mamedyarov played this against him. Typical of Mamedyarov, very aggressive. And actually, Giri found himself under enormous pressure. Giri played knight d7. I'm just going to show you these next few moves very quickly. You can see that Mamedyarov is going on the attack and indeed castled queenside. And actually, Giri's slightly modest response to this with knight d7 and queen e7 was, a little bit tame and allows white to play on the king side. And, there's no real pressure on white's centre here. But just compare that with the way that Vachier-Lagrave tackles this position. So first of all, he castles. Now, here you can play h4, you can maybe take on d5, but Giri goes for queen c2. Might have been better to put it on a dark square to give the pawn some protection. Now watch what happens. c5. This is a far more aggressive way of tackling white's position. This knight is fantastic on e5, supported by these pawns, or you could say supported by this sort of pawn triad. But with c5, black is undermining that pawn chain, attacking the pawn on d4, which in turn will undermine the position of the knight on e5. And actually, it's very hard for white to get his kingside attack in motion now that black is attacking in the centre. And it's very logical to attack the dark squares when you have this dark squared bishop on the long diagonal that doesn't have an opponent. It reminds me very much of certain Queen's Gambit decline positions, Tarkova positions, where this bishop, after an exchange on f6, is on f6, and then you open up with c5. This is very, very common. I've played many games with black like this, and this is even better for black because the bishop is tucked away on g7, and also this diagonal is closed. So it looks already like let's just say an easier position for black to play than white. If white takes here, then you can take here, and we can make use of that queen on f6, taking the pawn there. So Giri took on c5 here. Now maybe he should just try and sort of shore things up with g3, protect that pawn. But I think it's difficult for white. He took here, and now good reaction from Vachier-Lagrave, brings out the queen's knight. You want to get developed quickly, and attacks the knight on e5, which was exchanged off on c6. So we've had a transformation in the position. That knight on e5, which looked to be, rock solid there in the middle of the board, has gone. And this long diagonal is open for the queen and bishop. And I'm also noticing the open b file as well, with potential pressure on b2. Also in this position, I would like to put that pawn back on f2 to support the pawn on e3, which looks really shaky. So it's white's play. And white is a pawn up. Let's not forget that. Bishop d3 played. Now black could break things up with d4, but queen e7 also an excellent move. Very simple. Just wanting to take the pawn on c5, and that will highlight the weak pawn on e3. So understandably, knight a4 played to protect that pawn. But does that knight really want to be on a4? That's a sorry position for that knight to be in. And watch what happens. e5, very logical. Break open the position when white is weak down the e file. Let this bishop loose as well. It's a beautiful position for black. So Giri exchanged. Queen came up. Now, I think if white tried to protect this, with the queen or something, I think that really is courting disaster. Waiting one more move to get castled is really risky. So I think understandably Giri just got the king to safety and gave up this pawn. So now it's level material, but basically from a positional point of view, black is doing extremely well. 2 bishops. Funny thing is, although Maxime has played a Slav, he's ended up in a Grunfeld type position with black all the same, because in the Grunfeld, these bishops on g7 and e6, they're known as the Botvinnik bishops, after the great world champion Mikhail Botvinnik, who played some famous games with the Grunfeld with those bishops in exactly those positions. Yeah, it's curious. Exchange on d5, so that bishop comes to a very nice square, but of course the idea was to exchange off that bishop very quickly. And now black occupies the center with the rooks. This is very nice. And, well, just look at the difference between these minor pieces. That bishop just raking across the board, the knight stuck on the edge. And this is very difficult for white to play. The queen is knocked back. Okay, that's a good start for the defense. Here, I feel that knight needs attention. So, I mean, maybe one idea is we need to think about bringing it back into play. One idea is perhaps to play b3 and look at some point to play the knight back to b2, although it's never going to be easy with that bishop here. At the moment, of course, that's impossible because the bishop could take, so it's tricky. Giri plays rook e2. And now this is a very strong move. Exchanging bishops on c4, and now the rook enters the game with tempo, keeps the queen tied to the defense of the knight. Now it seems to me this queen has to come back here, keeping hold of the knight, but at least maintaining some coordination here with the rooks. Then of course, black could double on the d file, for example. That's one possibility. But this is still a fight. Black is clearly better, but white's in the game. Queen a6 struck me as a very strange move. The queen is moving away from the action. Yes, it's protecting the knight. Yes, it's looking at these 2 pawns, but it's just way too slow. And now Vachier-Lagrave turns towards the king. Remember, there are only 2 pawns in front of that king, whereas Black has 3 pawns. Yeah, a nice snuggly duvet. That seems to be my favourite image of the moment. That king just nestled behind those pawns, very safe. Whereas White's king, that isn't a duvet, that's a shroud in front of the king. Oh, I'm going to put red for danger. Watch what happens. Well, for example, if queen takes pawn on c6, then queen f4 wins immediately, threatening mate on h2 as well as the rook on f1. And of course, if that's taken, then we have a back rank checkmate. So bishop e5 just been played. So understandably, g3 was played by Giri to close off that diagonal, but now we've got another diagonal opening here. Queen h5, that is a nice move. Looking at the rook, looking at potentially here. Also looking at bishop takes g3, pin and win. We got a pin there. So that's a nice move, keeping up the pressure. Rook g2, miserable defensive move, but by this stage, I'm afraid it's all one-way traffic. And now we can see the back rank is weak. Here, probably the only chance is to play g4 to just knock that queen away. And also, it does force an exchange of rooks, but in this position, I mean, White's position is so ragged. For example, let's bring the knight back. You could take and play rook e8, and this back rank is weak. This diagonal is weak. These pawns are looking dreadful. And basically, this is a winning position for Black. But queen c4, played by Giri, loses instantly to queen f3. That was the final move of the game. Giri resigned. So why exactly did he resign? Well, I mean, obviously, that's impossible because of the pin. Let's look at rook takes d1. We take. The rook comes back. Let's give a check on f3. Okay, all forced so far, and now rook d8. Game over. No decent defense to either rook d1 or indeed rook d2 is also threatened. I mean, it's just game over. So yes, after queen f3, what else we got? Rook g1. You could play, well, simply rook d8, support this one. And again, we're ready to invade on either the first rank or the second rank. And actually, this is not difficult at all. What an absolutely crushing win. So that made it 2-0 in the match with 2 games to go. So Vachier-Lagrave only needed a draw out of his last 2 games, and he got that draw in the 3rd game. Had to suffer a bit, but held a draw. So basically, he won the match convincingly. In fact, they did play a 4th game, but that was just a draw. Convincing victory for Maxime Vachier-Lagrave over Anish Giri. In the other match, Caruana just edged out Nepomniachtchi. Interesting games, but, well, a little bit uneven, frankly, but, well, Caruana got there in the end. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, we'd be very grateful. Do check out the links to PayPal as well as patreon.com/PowerPlayChess. You'll find those links in the description. Thanks for watching.